you've been gifted in business, and what you do succeeds. And I think it's interesting to see that rogue, pioneering apostolic heart was there in your youth, and your love for money has now been redeemed. Of like, you don't love it as if it gives you identity and purpose, but you know how to make it. You're drawn to it, and now you're leveraging it to change and transform people's lives.
Yeah, it's a tool that can be used for great good or great bad. It's really up to us to choose, right? And I think, how do you break an addiction to greed? You break it with generosity.
Welcome to the Daron Earlewine Podcast, where we awaken you to become who you were born to be. Here's your host, Daron Earlewine.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's good to have you here on the Daron Earlewine Podcast. Once again, this is the at-home edition. If you're watching here on YouTube, you say, this is not the regular studio. You're right, at home here in my home studio, changing things up here a little bit this week, and we'll be back in the studio next week. But excited about this week's episode. I truly believe that, I believe this with every episode, but I really do have a conviction that this week's episode is going to be life-changing for many of you out there. And we're going to jump into that and talk about the idea of, is there actually a thing called redemptive capitalism? We don't talk a lot about, capitalism or socialism or any of the isms necessarily here on the Daron Earlewine Podcast, because our goal each week is to awaken you to become who you were born to be. And so it's not a lot about the isms. It's a lot about who God has created you to be and how you step into that. But today we're sitting down with a friend of mine, Ethan Fernhaber. And Ethan is a unique bro, to say the least. And he is going to drop some stuff on you guys in this episode that is going to be life-changing. And I can't wait to get into it. I don't want to talk too much on the front end of this episode, because I want to get you to his interview and some of the stuff that he talks about. And they're not concepts for Ethan. He's not giving you some stuff he read in a book. He's not giving you some stuff he got from his economics course in college. He's talking to you from his life and how he runs his company. And it is truly a story of redemptive capitalism. And I think right now in our society, guys, right now, there's definitely a narrative that capitalism is of the devil, that money is bad, that rich people are terrible, that rich people, all they do, and corporations, all they do is oppress people, and they're terrible. We need to tear them down. And personally, I don't think that's true at all. I think that's a gross oversimplification, and it's attacking greed, which is great to attack, but it's equating greed with possession. It's equating greed with rich people. It's equating greed with a company. Now, can rich people be greedy? Yes. Can companies oppress and hurt their workers and not take care of them? Yes. All these things are possible. But I think what's happening is, in many ways, we're throwing the baby out with the bathwater, and we're missing the opportunity that I think true creative redemptive capitalism gives us, the opportunity to create the future that's currently on the heart and the mind of God. Because here's the deal, and Ethan's going to unpack this, because Ethan, he is a rogue bee. We've talked about that. He's an apostolic pioneering leader. He has been his whole life. And he talks about how early in life he loved money, that he had a love affair with money. He talks about in the very first of how, when he was a kid, he remembers getting $50 and going and getting 50 singles, and then going home and ironing them so they would be like pressed in like crisp $1 bills. He loved money, but he said this. He said, how do you break an addiction? How do you break an addiction to greed? One word: generosity. And Ethan has understood that process, and he has been able to implement that into every area of his life. And it's so life-giving. I'm so excited for you guys to get into it, because here's the deal, guys. Greed actually has nothing to do with possessions, but it has everything to do with posture. And by posture, I mean the posture of the heart. Greed has nothing to do with possessions. It has everything to do with posture. Because here's the deal. We like to believe that the people that are rich, well, they're greedy. That's a fallacy, because the poorest person on your street can be the most greedy person on your block. Because it doesn't matter if you have $400,000 or you have $14,000. The issue is your heart and how you see money. It's not about how much money you have. It's about how much money has you. And that's what Ethan's going to get into, because when you look at the biblical narrative of what we're called into and what God has created us to be as his intimate allies, as John Eldredge says, we're partnering with him to create the future that's on his mind and on his heart. And that's what Jesus tells us to pray, right? He prays us that it asks us to pray that God would actually allow us to see his kingdom come and his will be done on earth as it is in heaven. That we're seeing God's kingdom come to earth. And if you look at God's connection to humanity from the beginning of the Bible, when God came into relationship with Abraham, right? He said, you're going to be blessed, right? I'm going to bless you so you can be a blessing. You're blessed to be a blessing. He didn't say, hey, I'm not going to give you anything because I'm afraid you'll get greedy. You know what? My plan is for you to be poor and under-resourced for your entire existence. Because if everybody has just nothing, then everything will be fair, and that's the great way that I've decided to run the world. No, God said, here's the deal. I'm going to bless you. I'm going to bless you abundantly so that blessing can flow through you, so you can be a conduit for blessing. And I think that's something we got to get our mind around, is that having wealth and having the capacity to create wealth is not evil. It's actually an amazing gift from God, because God has equipped some of you are equipped by God uniquely to create wealth, to create jobs, to create companies, to create resources, to create industries, so that you can bless others, so that God's blessing and actual solutions to actually bring redemption to generational sin and oppression can come through your redemptive, creative, capitalistic mind. I really believe that you're blessed to become a blessing. I want to jump into the interview, but I just want to say this. Today, I want to talk specifically to some of the apostle and pioneer listeners that we have. In Spiritual DNA, we take you through understanding your voice in God's kingdom, your fivefold ministry calling or vocation, or your voice. It comes from Ephesians chapter 4, and it breaks down like this. There's apostles, prophets, evangelists, shepherds, and teachers. One other word we could throw in there that's a little more of a real world context, right, would be an apostle would be a pioneer or an entrepreneur. A prophet would be a creative. An evangelist would be a connector. And a shepherd would be a nurturer. And a teacher would be a guardian. And I don't want you to tune out if you're not an apostle pioneer, but I want to talk specifically today to apostle pioneers, because here's the deal. I don't believe it was an accident that you're listening to the podcast today. I don't care if you listen to this 2 years after it's released. I believe that there is a problem in our world, or there's a problem in your city, in your community, in your school system, in your business, wherever. There is a problem right now on this earth that God has created you uniquely to solve it. You have been given gifts and abilities and creativity and talents and ideas that God has specifically given to you to solve a current problem that our world is facing. And I believe you're listening to today's podcast, and it's going to be a watershed moment, that some of the things that Ethan is going to say, that God is going to speak to you through Ethan's words, and it's going to awaken something in you to step into become who you were born to be and create the future. And it's a future of reconciliation. It's a future of redemption. It's a future of resources being spread and given to lift people up. And Ethan is going to take you on that journey, and I want to jump into it. He's going to just drop some stuff, and he talks about, Ethan's a phenomenal businessman. He has over 108 employees. He runs basically apartment complexes and condo complexes all over Indiana. He has over 10,000 people living under his roofs. And his vision and what he's doing is absolutely transformational. And the way he is using and creating economic models to actually help people, creating generational blessings for other families from the blessings and the wealth that God is bringing him, using the wealth and privilege that God has given him to actually share wealth and privilege with others. It's a beautiful model. You're going to love this interview. When we come back, I just want to talk about what God is saying to you and what you're going to do about it, because I know there are problems in your city and in our world that need to be solved. And it needs to be the people of God, the people that are connected with the very heart and the very mind of Jesus, that move forward and actually make a difference, that don't allow greed to be something that holds them back, that don't allow the narrative that's coming through our world to tell you what is good and bad, but it'll actually allow the Word of God and the Spirit of God to bring you to life, to inspire you, and to give you creative ideas. Right, we talked about that in episode, like last week's episode. The creativity is going to be the natural result of spirituality, and that God can actually begin to bring creative ideas to see you help solve problems, to actually erase and bring healing to generational sins that have been brought through our country and around the world. God is creating a future that is on His mind and on His heart, and is looking for people like you, apostolic and pioneering leaders, that are willing to lean into generosity, that are willing to lean into creativity, and see that redemptive creativity and redemptive capitalism change the world. Let's jump into the interview right now with Ethan Fernhaber. I love it. You're going to love it. It's going to inspire you. Let's jump in right now.
Hey, excited to sit down with my good friend Ethan Fernhaber. And Ethan, we have known each other for a handful of years now. We met at Mercy Road Church, where I get a chance to be a part of the teaching team there. And I've wanted to have you on the podcast for a while because I'm so excited for people to hear just kind of the development of your life and your mission. You're the president of Renewing Management. You're also, are you president of Multiply Indiana as well?
Yeah, they kind of forced me into that role.
So you're doing Multiply Indiana. We'll unpack what that mission, but reaching people through church planting through all over Indiana. And then you've just stepped into a new venture that I want us to talk about. And so you're an apostolic, pioneering type of leader. And you have, from the moment I met you, you have inspired me like crazy because you have an ability, and I don't know if it's an ability or if it's just you've made the tenacious decision that it's like you're just going to go ahead and apply the teachings of Jesus to like every sphere of your life, and you practically do it. It's just like, well, Jesus would tell us to do this, so I'm just going to go ahead and do this. And every time the story of it is somehow cool. God gets the glory for it, but amazing things happen. People's lives are changed. And I want to unpack that because here on the podcast, we talk about all the time that we believe everybody was born on purpose and for a purpose. And so we're helping people awaken to that journey. But,
and how many people never see why they were created, right?
Yeah. And can get caught up in desire for money, fame, power, prestige, whatever it can be. And so I just want to unpack that. I'm so glad you're on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you. I have a high regard for you and everything that you're doing at the Spiritual DNA team. And, I really think that what you're doing is so needed in today's world. And as I interact with humans every single day, I want to get them out of a position where they're not flourishing and into a position that God has called them into and where they need to be. So
I love it, Ethan. So somebody might see your life now and go, well, that's great, Ethan. You've got the businesses going and you've got this relationship, vibrant relationship with Jesus, and you're doing all this stuff. But that's not a life that I could live because I didn't grow up in a perfect super Christian home like Ethan did and have all the advantages that Ethan did, right? But I'm guessing that's not totally the story.
Yeah. I grew up in a broken lower middle class household in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and my parents got divorced at a very young age, and I didn't really thrive in high school. Once my parents got divorced, really like the structure of my house was taken off. And when you go through something traumatic like that, you don't make the best decisions. So, I guess drugs and alcohol were a part of my young adult life, and I really lived without boundaries, and I ran from authority and I ran from structure, and then thankfully along the way I met a Christian woman and saw her parents, and I was like, why are these people happy? They don't have money and they're not drunk. It doesn't make any sense at all. And they happen to be Christian, and those are the same Christians that I made fun of in high school because I really didn't understand them, and eventually I think it was the prayers of either her parents or her parents' parents that caused me to come to my knees and give up the life that I was living for Christ. And that was a transformative relationship for me. And, I guess once you go through that, I went back to church, and, I remember speaking to the pastor, and he's like, oh, don't worry, that excitement, that enthusiasm, that's going to wear off, like just look forward to that. It's typical, you know.
That's what the pastor told you? Yeah. I know you're excited now, but go ahead, listen. It gets boring after this,
it's like
right?
a 2-week thing, right? Like it'll wear off eventually, and it hasn't worn off. You know what I mean? And I don't know how you can carry this gift that God has given us and be okay with the broken state of the world and just go to church every week as a routine. You know, it just doesn't make sense. It still doesn't make sense to me. Like, we are called, we are equipped, and it's a hurting and broken world out there. So what can we do as children of God to help the hurting people who are out there?
So I guess you're saying this was a new discovery, because growing up, this was not modeled for you at all.
Well, no. I mean, I grew up, you know, just with greed and the love of money, right? I remember getting $50 for my birthday, and I would take my $50 to the bank, and I would get all singles, and then I would spread out my singles, and I would get the iron, and I would iron each single, and I would stack it up and pile it out and fold it up. Oh yeah. I mean, if
you say you loved money, like you loved money.
No, man, if you're going to do it, like, let's go. Let's just do it. Right. So, and, you know, and then I would go to $1 and, you know, I'd have $1 and I'd go to the, you know, the penny candy store and I get like 100 candy raisins. I mean, like, that's wealth to an economy of a 10-year-old, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyhow, and then like when my parents got divorced, it was like just exasperated because I really felt like money and strength would keep me safe in a world where that was not safe. It wasn't okay, you know?
Yeah.
So, you know, so then I was a meat cutter because that was what paid really well. And I went through college because I knew there was something that would bring me more money. And I got a degree in economics and finance. And then I figured, well, where can I learn about money? The bank, you know, they got lots of money. Yeah. So I got a job with the bank, and I ended up doing like commercial audit and then liquidation work for the bank, and ended up on this one transaction. I made the bank $1 million that they didn't expect, and I got a free coffee mug and a $50 gift certificate.
Thanks, Ethan. We'll take the $1 million. Enjoy the coffee mug.
Yeah, exactly. And the shareholder price went up by 3 cents for how many, you know, many people. So anyhow, and at that point in time, my brother got a book in real estate, and it was like, oh, okay, well, this might be the next pathway to money. It's through real estate, you know?
Well, one thing I want to stop you real quick, Ethan. Yeah. One thing I think is interesting is so often I believe that the seeds of who God has created us to be, that they're there from the moment that God creates us.
Yeah.
And they're present, whether or not we've given them to God to leverage for great good.
Yeah.
And two things I see in your story is before you even came into a connection with God, I believe that God, you talked about being really, really rebellious. And one thing that I've began to understand, I remember a mentor of mine, or a friend of mine, had a mentor that told him, he said, hey, you know what? He said, you're a rogue bee. And I'd never heard of this idea of a rogue bee. And for me, I've always struggled within the context of institutional church and any structure. I've never done well with it. And because I'm an apostolic pioneering type of leader, much like you are. And I always thought I was a rebel. Yeah. And he said, well, here's the deal with rogue bees. He said, in each hive, and I haven't studied this, I don't know if this is absolutely true, because I don't do a lot of beehive study, but I'm going to take it on in this word, that in every hive, like 99% of bees or whatever are worker bees. But each hive has like 7 to 9 or something rogue bees. And their job is to leave the hive and go out and find the location of where the hive will go next. Mm. And in that process, like 7 of the 9 die, like looking for the next hive. Yeah. But the one that finds it and lives, like he creates the future of the hive. And he said, his mentor said, listen, you're not a rebel, you're a rogue.
Yeah.
And that was freeing to me to not feel like that all of some of that angst and you know, when it is immature and young in life and maybe you're bucking against the system, like that was the immature expression of it. But a lot of that is maybe that God had put that kind of entrepreneurial.
Yeah, what a beautiful gifting. Yeah. But the world doesn't recognize it or appreciate it. Yeah. They just see you as nonconformist and disobedient, you know? Yeah.
Yes. But it's
great wisdom, man.
You're a rogue. And I see the other part about it is in an immature, greedy, like non-redeemed by Christ's way, you had a love for money. But what I see in your life now is that God has given you, I think there's an anointing on your life to make money. Mm. You've been gifted in business, and what you do succeeds. And I think it's interesting to see that rogue, pioneering, apostolic heart was there in your youth. And your love for money has now been redeemed of like, you don't love it as if it gives you identity and purpose, but you know how to make it. You're drawn to it, and now you're leveraging it to change and transform people's lives.
Yeah, it's a tool that can be used for great good or great bad. It's really up to us to choose, right? And I think, how do you break an addiction to greed? You break it with generosity, right? Like, I mean, that's just like the healthy work that you need to do if you're struggling with giving away money. And now we use a systematized and disciplined approach to give away money. And it's not just, does somebody really need it or want it more than I do? It's like, no, like, we give a percentage on everything that we make away, and hopefully that percentage will increase and not decrease. And then we've been able to just cap our own personal spending to what's normal and what's okay and not just disgusting. It's not our goal to elevate ourselves above those people that we love and interact with, And I guess as we do accumulate wealth, we use it to share privilege. So we have a condo on the ocean, and we use that so that employees can have family vacations, not so that we can just go there and use it, right? And when I get a text message that says my wife just walked in and is crying at how beautiful this place is, like that's, if like Christ had a condo, he wouldn't just keep it for himself, I'm pretty sure.
Wow. See, that's an example. Ethan, what I said during intro was like, yes, what you just said is practically absolutely true. Like Jesus would have probably, he was on earth, but I mean, right now, maybe he would have an awesome condo. And you're right. Like, what would he do? Like, hoard it, keep it, hide it, don't tell anybody, no one gets. No, he'd be like, oh yeah, you guys want to use it next week? No problem. But like, you just practically applied that and by that, like, but that's not normative. Most people, it's like, well, no, I worked hard. I paid for the condo. I'm not going to send your snotty-nosed kids down to break something in it, right?
Well, you need to take the I out of the equation, right? If the Bible says lend freely, we have a 0% interest rate employee advance because the Bible says lend freely. Don't overthink it, right? You know what I mean? Love your neighbor as yourself. So if you want to get yourself something cool, that's great. Just make sure you give away as much as you spend on yourself. Then then it feels okay and you're not ashamed of that, So
I love it. Let's get back to the story. So your brother gets into some real estate. He gets a book of that begins going. Is that the track that took you into what's become now Renewing Management?
Yeah. So we started with our home equity line of credit that we saved up $20,000, and we bought a double wide in Owensburg, Indiana, and ended up rehabbing it myself. Me and my wife got in there and put in new sticky tiles and a little bit of paint and put in a new hot water heater and turned the gas on, and then there was 9 leaks in the gas line. So I called my brother and I'm like, hey, what gives, man? It stinks like gas in here. And he's like, well, did you put pipe tape on it? I'm like, what is that? He's like, well, yeah. So I'm not well equipped at maintenance. You know what I mean? I'm just more of a spreadsheet guy, and at that point in time, it was like, well, if we're going to make this thing happen, we're going to have to find people to do the work, and then I was immediately attached to some people that had really gotten great relationship with, but they were addicted. They were using drugs at the time, opioids and heroin and stuff like that. And so, I was like, man, I'm going to, create economic models to help these people that I care about. Right. So I'll take Kenny to the BMV and I'll get him his license back and go in front of the judge and get him a new set of teeth and, do all the things so that Kenny can succeed. But he didn't, because the drugs and the devil took those things away faster than I could pour them out, So at some point in the journey, I had to realize I am not God. I cannot play God. And without God, there is no lasting change. So thankfully, he brought me to my knees and said, let me go first. Let me be your Lord first, and then just follow me, right? And then everything is lasting and permanent and beautiful, and I don't matter anymore, right? I really don't. 3-4 generations, nobody's going to remember me, And what's my hope is that, I can create a generational blessing so that all the glory just points to Christ.
I love it, Ethan. So unpack a little bit, because those are the beginnings, the genesis of the heart behind what you've done with Renewing Management. But explain, what is the company?
Yeah.
But your relationship with your employees, the kind of employees that you look to bring in to to bless, to continue to walk. It's very unique. So unpack some of that for us.
Yeah. So currently we're a multifamily owner and operator. So we did the single family thing a couple hundred times and then eventually moved our way out of that single family market. In 08 and 09, we bet everything that we had in multifamily, and praise God, because it was a scary time for single family operators. I remember, a friend and mentor of mine was a real estate broker on the deal, and I really didn't trust anyone at that time. And I remember him calling me, and he's like, I'm not sure why there were, 12 offers on the property. Yours was number 2 or 3. It was like $200,000 less than the top offer, and you don't have experience in this place, but the bank decided to award you the offer. So congratulations. So it's just like, what do I deserve, Daron? I deserve eternal damnation, and I deserve to be bankrupt. You know what I mean? So like, that's what I'm entitled to. That's what I deserve. So anything beyond that, it's just like house money. You know what I mean? God's blessing. So now we're into multifamily between 80 and 300 units. We have 17 communities across the state under contract, hopefully by the end of this week for 18, about 3,000 doors, 10,000 units, or 10,000 heartbeats if you look at how many humans are actually living at our community. So renewing management, we've got like 108 employees. We're all over the state of Indiana, and we hope to grow it from 18 to 40 within the next 10 years.
And you talk about communities, and that's really how you guys, that's your vision for it, right? This isn't like just people that live there and they're tenants or they pay the bills, but you're trying to develop communities in these communities.
Yeah, it's all about relationships, right? Like God built us for relationships, and we've seen in our own family, like the racial divides come tumbling down when you fall in love actually with somebody of a different race or a different socioeconomic background than you. So the community that's closest to our home is Private Reserve on the north side of Indianapolis. And, we've partnered with that community for years and got deep relationships with many of the residents and started community gardens there. And, our church, Mercy Road, was intimately involved with the youth there at the community, and we met as an outpost there at Private Reserve for a couple of years. So, we want to focus on relationships. We want to focus on redemption. We want to focus on emotional health, financial literacy. We just really want to, and it's not about us doing the work. All the gifts of the community already exist. So it's kind of like, how can, if we agree that gifts are equally distributed, right? Like the humans living at Private Reserve have amazing gifts, right? But like privilege and resources not. So how can we get behind their giftings and their callings and raise them up as leaders within their communities to do the work that God has called them to do? Yeah. All the stuff is already there. It's just putting it together.
And you've got the same kind of vision for your employees as well. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, we love our employees, and, I guess one part of our redemptive story is that we hire some people coming out of incarceration. And those people are part of a reentry team that's led by John Gammon. John spent 18 years in prison and is, for me, a spiritual mentor. He follows Christ like very few people here on earth do, and is a great inspiration to all the men and women who work for our organization. We also, a lot of this is Christian based, right? But we're not a exclusively Christian organization,
sure,
right? So I have Muslim friends and atheist friends and friends who are all over the spectrum belief wise. And that's great, right? Like Christ has called us into the world. Yeah. And we're not huge on like judgment and hierarchy, right?
Yeah.
So
neither is Jesus. That works really well.
Yeah. And just to So anyhow, we have 100 people, and man, I'm blessed to have them in my lives, and they pour into me in ways that, man, it's hard to put into words.
So here's I've got a problem with it, Ethan. Is if I'm running a business, and I guess I am in some ways, but like, you watch, ZipRecruiter or whatever the commercial is going to be about finding new employees, and here's how you can find great employees. It's like most people, it's like, okay, I got to find somebody that we got to check, make sure no criminal record, none of this, just squeaky clean. Let's check their Facebook, make sure they're not doing stupid stuff. And then if they're the best of the best of the best, then that's the kind of people we want. That's who we'll hire.
So that's fear-based leadership.
Okay, talk about that.
Yeah. Well, I was afraid too, right? I mean, multifamily, there is criminal background checks. You really believe that, if you do all your checks, then that'll keep you safe. And honestly, it's the same thing as living in a gated community as in Carmel, right? Like, if you live in the gated community, then you'll be away from all the bad things of the world. It changes when you fall in love with somebody who has a criminal record and you see the fact that they've lived a life behind bars and that their future shouldn't be determined by a bad decision. Daron, I've made bad decisions. Should my future be determined by those bad decisions? No, it shouldn't. So why don't we accept those people into our organization? Do turning our backs to problems stop problems from occurring, in your own home? You know what I mean? Ignoring it, does that make it go away? So if we ignore this whole segment of our population, do you think our bigger C community will be better? Do you think the gates around your nice house really protect you from anything? You can still get leukemia. You can still die in a car accident. Guess what? You can get through the gate. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. If the riots would have occurred in Carmel and Zionsville, then what? You know what I mean? So I don't know. I don't believe in fear-based leadership. I believe that if we invite people into relationship with us, that they have the ability to change their lives and to do great things, right? And we want to be known as a sending organization. So if somebody works for us for a period of time and then they go start their own business, like, we'll even start finance that. You know what I mean? If you're called to be a truck driver, here's some startup funds to go drive a truck. It's not, we need to keep everybody and make sure they never look anywhere else. I mean, we just want to bless all the humans that we interact with. And that's that. Wow.
That's a take home right there of just the difference of like fear-based leadership or faith-based leadership, of embracing that God has a bigger plan for people, that you want to believe in hope and what they can become, because that's, like you're saying, that's what we'd want for ourselves. And it makes me feel like it's got to feel like a much more expansive way to lead than trying to control and create almost like a scarcity mindset, right? Yeah. And I know that's what people love, being around you and what you guys are doing. And so one of the things I've heard people talk about is seeing, and this might be a way to kind of encapsulate the way that you guys run your company, is seeing business as mission, which I think is so key, because we have people on the podcast maybe when they're thinking, well, if I'm going to really do something for Jesus, I got to go like work in the church. Mm-hmm. And I know when I was growing up, one of the difficult parts for me to be able to trust Jesus was like, I want to be a drummer and be in music and influence the musical artistic world. I didn't want to go work in a church, but I thought the only way you can really change the world is if you're in the sphere of society that's religion, which in my opinion is a total lie, because we need people who are living their life on mission for Christ in every sphere of society. And so talk a little bit about that being your philosophy, because you are involved in your local church. You've helped launch Multiply Indiana, which is a movement to plant churches, hundreds of them throughout the state of Indiana, and make a difference. So, you're very involved in church, but like why don't you just shut down the whole company and go just be like a missionary, or just work inside, one small local church or something?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I totally struggled with that question as well. Should I just be an executive pastor and do that for just Mercy Road or maybe a different church? And the answer is no. God has called me as an apostle and as a pastor to these people that I'm shepherding, and there's no one else right now that he is called to be in that position. So, I think about, revival in the marketplace, and I believe that revival has already started. And I think that revival is something that Billy Graham even spoke about, and it's so needed because our marketplaces are desperate places. I mean, people have used Jesus as like a marketing tool. You know what I mean? Like, buy for me because I'm a Christian, and now I can take advantage of that and charge you more money. I mean, how gross is that to the world?
Yeah.
And I think like us as business leaders, we need to carry our faith with us wherever we go. Church on Sunday, work on Monday morning, all the interactions before and after work. Mm-hmm. It's just it's a 360-degree, 7-day-a-week thing that God has called us into. So I don't know. I'm called to lead renewing management for right now, and I'm breaking off into 2 different directions now with development and then volumetric modular housing manufacturing, as this rogue bee continues to fly out of the hive and figure out what's next.
So tell us about that. What's the new venture? Tell us about it and the heartbeat behind it.
Yeah. So that volumetric modular construction is basically just creating new homes in a factory environment. So we're going to take out all the inefficiency of new construction and put it into the factory. The factory, it's never raining, never snowing. We're going to break down the entire construction process into simple, repeatable processes. Everything's going to have an instruction sheet with pictures and just step by step. This is how you do this particular phase of the assembly. We're going to buy the machinery and equipment required. We're going to start buying all the parts wholesale that would go into a home, and we believe that we'll be able to produce a better home at a more affordable price than anyone else here in the state. We really want to we want to have people working for us that actually want to work. So we're going to target people coming out of addiction, homelessness, and incarceration for part of our employee base. And then we're going to put equity back in the hands of some of our employees by offering them homes at or near cost. So you can, the city of Indianapolis has 6,000 vacant lots. If we can sell somebody out of incarceration a brand new home for, let's say, $70,000, and they get the house for free, and it costs them $15,000 for water, sewer, and electrical connections, how beautiful would that be to have that person in a home for $425 a month? I mean, it'd just be beautiful, and it would reverse some of the generational sins of the past as well.
Where did that idea come from, Ethan?
Well, I actually got invited to my friend Matt Crouch's dissertation at UIndy, and it was all about modular home manufacturing. It's like, man, that's brilliant. Why aren't we doing that? So I went to that, and then I went to a lunch with that John Gammon, my director of reentry. He had this lunch with all the people in Indianapolis who are coming out of incarceration, just a way for them to connect. And at that lunch, I got connected to G, who was friends with Mark, who is another partner. So Matt Crouch and Mark Young are partners on this Volumod, this new venture that we're creating. And so I guess that was it. We went to got an invitation, showed up, and it's like, yeah, that's brilliant. We should do that, and now it's just, God's hand is all over it. We're buying it from another Indiana firm, and I was doing the research on who actually owned it, and it's owned by Cross Properties LLC. And then, it's like, okay, God, that's a sign. That's legitimate.
So do you feel like, would it be correct to say you feel like God has led you into this opportunity?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, Darren, like just my own flesh, I'd be good for like 8 houses, but 3,000 units and new manufacturing opportunities. That's not me. I'm just not genetically capable enough or gifted enough. This is just me following the cloud that God has put in front of me, and then just obediently following in the steps that he has laid out for me in my life, so just step by step.
But when this is successful, Ethan, you will develop a company that could employ and give a ton of people jobs.
Yeah.
You will have developed housing that could absolutely transform a family tree. Like generationally, this could be something that completely changes the life of someone. And when it comes back to, hey, I could have just bought another condo that I don't share with people in Florida, and retired and been really, really happy. But you didn't, because you really do take seriously the mission that Christ has given us, and his love has so transformed your life. But I want people to hear that kind of vision, because you're not some kind of special person. You're a leader. You're an apostle, right? But you have an ability to do business, to make money, and you're just taking ideas that make sense and going, how could we actually help practically love and serve people in the process?
Yeah. So I'm to the point now where I could have all the earthly stuff that I would want, and I would end up in my basement, isolated and all alone, and the devil would be celebrating, right? Because I would be absolutely miserable without authentic relationship, without making a difference, without pursuing the call that God has placed on my heart. And that's not going to be my future, right? I'll go to Christ and I'll ask him, what is it for me today, and then just be in neutral all day and wait for his prompting and his calling, and then just pursue whatever avenue he puts in front of me.
I love it, Ethan. And let's wrap with this. Somebody's listening, somebody's watching right now. And when we talked about being a rogue bee, when we talked about, that entrepreneur and pioneering spirit, they're like, that's me. And maybe they're at the starting place trying to figure out, how do I live this life of mission and adventure that Ethan's talking about? Or maybe they've done it. They've got a company like you. They run it, and they're going, he's right. Like, I bought another boat last year or something, and
now I gotta fix it.
And it just, things keep not satisfying.
Yeah.
What's a practical step somebody could take to begin that next step of saying, okay, God, how do I really get in on the action?
Yeah. Well, for the guy with the boat, I consider myself a venture capitalist for the kingdom of God. So, how can you use the capital that you have for your good and his glory? All the idle there's so much idle capital right now. And who wants to be a lame fractional shareholder in some, sugar producing company? It's like not that great. But there's entrepreneurs right now who need funding, who have been called by God to go out into the marketplace and to make a difference. So, man, I would love to connect with some of those people and share some of the stories that we have. And I'd love to put together a fund to fund micro enterprises through Nexus on the northwest side of Indianapolis. I mean, we would love to be a sending place for entrepreneurs. And I think, spiritually, man, fast, pray, read the Bible. You know what I mean? For me, fasting was a huge deal because I'm naturally a pleasure seeker. And I always thought that I deserve stuff. I deserve a great dinner. I worked hard today, and after 40 days of all liquids, it's, putting your flesh aside, right? And I believe that the God's fire falls on the altar of our obedience, so if we can just put ourselves second and him first, I think he'll draw close to us during those times. And I think we'll hear from him and feel his presence in a new and different way.
I love it, Ethan. I was so excited to have you on the podcast because I knew I'd be inspired personally, but I knew there was people that are regular listeners that needed to have their imagination expanded a little bit. And I find that so often, as I believe that so many of us, we would do something more, we would take a greater risk, but we suffer with a deficit of imagination.
And people are free. Can we just say, if you have Christ, you are absolutely free. I talk to my friends who spent decades behind bars, and they got it more figured out than my buddy who makes $90,000 a year. You know what I mean? Because they know what they truly have. If you have Christ in your heart, you're free. Why not acknowledge and walk in that freedom? What is, how much money should it really take to live? We have people who are on the wrong path because they can't take a $10,000 salary reduction. That's messed up, man. If you're stuck in a cubicle for 45 or 50 hours a year because of a $10,000 Delta, give up the new car. You know what I mean? Just give it back,
Yeah.
And why can't we just say and encourage people to do that? But they're like, no, we're trapped. Disney's got to make $5,000 off of me this year because we got to go on vacation. You don't have to take that vacation. You can go to the beach. You can go for a walk. You know what I mean? You can do some different things, and it's going to be more fun than being trapped. So acknowledge and embrace the freedom that Christ has provided you, and realize this isn't a dress rehearsal. This is it, man.
Yeah.
We get one take.
Yeah.
It's important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. Ethan, how can somebody be connected? Maybe they want to get connected to what you guys are doing at Nexus, Multiply Indiana, Renewing Management, the new company. How can they get connected to Ethan? Because
there's so much. I know
there's so much, but
so you're going to put it on the show notes.
Yeah,
right?
we are going to put it on the show notes so you can click on there, but just say it so we have it on the audio as well.
Renewing Management, our website is Where You Matter, where the letter U matter.com. Nexus is impactconnected.com. Multiply Indiana is multiplyindiana.com. And I don't think Volumod has a website yet.
Right, it's coming.
It's just an idea right now, but it's going to get really real here in a couple months. So,
Ethan, I love talking with you. I always have, because you stir up so much of the pioneering and apostolic heart that I have. And I think one of the things that inspires me so much is I've been saying sometimes I'll go back and see like an old sermon that I preached in like 2004 or something. And I'm like, I've been saying the same thing over and over again for over 20 years.
Right.
And I love it when I see somebody that I'm like, man, I really believe these things, but I don't know if everyone else really believes it. And I think what it is, this just made sense to me as you're talking, is like, the reason I love it is it's like you're actually doing it. You're taking all these things that we say are so true about what it looks like to live a true adventure with Jesus, and you're just practically doing it. You're taking the risk. You're stepping into it, and it's infectious. You truly are creating the future that is currently on the heart and the mind of God, because you've allowed Him to have your mind and your imagination and your gifts, and it's beautiful.
Well, and thank you for the gift of spiritual DNA. You know, I went through that course. It was totally eye-opening. I've been a table leader twice.
Yeah.
I mean, you're a huge part of that journey, and maybe it's like, well, maybe I'm not screwed up. Maybe this is just what God has called me to be. And
Absolutely.
Then you just see that with person and person and person and person and person all around the table, and it's like, yes, you too. This is what you're called to be. Just operate in that calling. Honestly, being broke's not that bad. I've been there before. You know what I mean? Like, it's not that bad. People think, well, having money is like all that great. But honestly, running water, right? We have food to eat here in America. The vast majority of us do. And we've got other humans. So take a risk, man, and run after what God has called you to be. So
I love it. Ethan, we'll have you on again. We'll just have you on your regular time anytime we need to get re-energized with vision and risk. Love it. Thanks so much, brother.
All right. Thank you, Daron.
And we're back. Although I don't have my sound effects here at the home studio. It's just not the same. You don't have the dream sequence chimes. It just doesn't feel like we went anywhere, but we did. Oh my gosh. Ethan just dropping bombs on us, guys. I mean, there's so many quotes. You need to go back and listen to this, make some notes as far as everything that Ethan brought, right? Talking about falling in love with someone of a different race or different social economic level, that as you fall in love with people, it changes the way you act, it changes the way that you serve, it changes the way that you interact and the way you're motivated to bring love and to bring resource and bring privilege into their life. As he talked about the gifts being, equally distributed, but privilege and resources are not. And if we lean into the idea of a faith-based leadership, not a fear-based leadership, we can actually begin to see generations of people's lives changed. That is creativity, spiritually infused creativity. I love it so much. I'd love to hear from you and what God said to you through this. Because I really did. I prayed before this and believed that this could be a watershed episode for somebody, that God is going to give you an idea like He's given Ethan to begin to create economic models that change people's lives. And why shouldn't that be the case? Why shouldn't the people of God, why shouldn't the people following Jesus that created the world, why shouldn't they be the people that go forward and actually create the future that's on His mind? That's the only option. But you have to believe that. You have to embrace that. You have to be awakened to that and step into creating that. So two questions. Two questions is this. Here's the first question is, what is God saying to you through this episode? What is God saying to you? And the second question is this: what are you going to do about it? What is God saying to you, and what are you going to do about it? Those two questions should shape everything, or can shape everything in your life. As you were listening to that, what was God saying? What was stirring in your mind? What was stirring in your heart? What did you feel like that you were being drawn into? And what is God saying to you through that? And then what are you going to do about it? God doesn't inspire. God doesn't awaken. God doesn't speak to us just so we can write some stuff down in our journal and be like, oh, that was cool. That was neat to hear. No, it's action-based. It's momentum-based. The kingdom of God is forcefully advancing. It's forceful men and women that take hold of it. So what's God saying to you? What are you going to do about it? I've shared this story before here on the podcast, but I remember sitting down with lunch with my friend Daron Campbell, great entrepreneurial leader, apostolic guy. And he said, Daron, he said, I want you to remember three things as you move forward to join God and creating the future. He said this: when you get excited about something that moves God's kingdom forward, so something that maybe today there's an idea, maybe it's something similar to what Ethan is doing, something stirred inside you and think, you know what, I could go after that. If I could embrace generosity, if I could begin to fall in love with people that are different than I am, if I could begin to embrace more of a faith-based leadership model, if I begin to ask God to give me creative ideas to utilize capitalism to actually bring Christ-centered problem-solving industry, and that'd be really exciting if I could do X, Y, and Z. Here's what Daron Campbell told me. I love it. He said, if you're excited about something that's on God's heart and his mind, he is 10 times more excited about it than you are. And I want you to hear that as permission to go, permission to try, permission to fail. Like, you're excited about it. Good. Stoke that excitement and passion and go after it, because God is just as excited. In fact, he's 10 times more excited than you are. He said, the second thing is this, that God will always stack the deck in your favor. I love there at the end of the interview when Ethan's talking about he met this guy and he met that guy. And all of a sudden, before you know it, he meets this guy that has this connection. And all of a sudden, the team is being put together right in front of his eyes, more than he could ever ask or imagine. That the deck is being stacked for them to create this new industry that's going to actually change the course of human history for hundreds of families. How is that not God's kingdom coming and his will being done on earth, as it is in heaven? It is. And God is excited, and he will stack the deck in your favor if you will move out with faith-based, generous, creative leadership. And the last thing is this, to remember, it's not about you. It's about him and about seeing his kingdom come and people's lives changed. And, man, so good. I love doing this podcast, and I love being able to bring people into your life that are going to help you think and dream and process and live differently, because God has changed their perspective and their paradigm on their world. If you got an idea, if God gave you a brainstorm, I want to hear about it. I want to pray for you. I want to get our team praying for you. I want you to reach out to me at Daron@blackbirdmission.com. Just email me there. Hit me up on Facebook, Instagram. I'd love to talk to you and to pray about and maybe help you strategize how you could move forward in whatever idea God has given you, because the future is going to be created by you. And I can't wait to be a part of the process with you. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Daron Earlewine Podcast. If you don't know the unique ways that God has created you to create the future, I want to encourage you, head over to spiritualdna.me, buy the online course, go through it, get help with our online community, ask questions through the course, and begin that process of understanding and discovering who God's created you to be. It's probably step one in this process. I want to encourage you to do it. Appreciate you. Love you. Thanks so much for listening to this episode. And until we talk to you again, never forget these three things. God is for you, not against you. God is near you, not far away from you. And God has created you on purpose and for purpose. Until next time, this is the Daron Earlewine Podcast.